My family cut me off completely. They thought I was broke, struggling, a failure. They were ashamed of me. They refused to acknowledge my existence. But here's what they didn't know. I was the silent investor behind 3 of their biggest business deals. I watched them for years, making decisions without knowing the truth. And when they finally discovered who I really was, everything exploded. This is the story of the ultimate plot twist. If you believe in karma, subscribe now, and watch what happens when they find out. Quick cuts of luxury buildings, then switching to startup office, then back to luxury estate. Dramatic music shifts from sad to powerful. It started with a phone call I wasn't expecting. My father's voice on the other end was cold, clinical, final. "Marcus, we've made a decision. After careful consideration, we've concluded that continuing to support your lifestyle isn't in anyone's best interest. Effective immediately, we're cutting off all financial support. You need to learn the value of money." I didn't respond. I couldn't. Because the irony was so thick I could taste it. My family, my billionaire family, was cutting me off because they believed I was a burden. A disappointment. A son who'd rejected their empire and was now living hand-to-mouth in Brooklyn, working some non-profit job for peanuts. If only they knew. My mother sent an email 2 days later. It was written with the same coldness you'd use to fire an employee, not address your own child. "Marcus, your father and I have decided that you are no longer welcome at family events. Your choices have brought shame to the Blackwell name. We suggest you focus on your own life and stop expecting handouts from us. We wish you well, but separately." David didn't even bother reaching out. His silence was louder than any words. I sat in my small office in Brooklyn, the office of my investment firm, and read that email 3 times. Each time, I felt something between sadness and amusement. They had no idea who I was. Not really. They thought they knew me because they'd raised me. But they'd never actually seen me. Let me back up. When I left the family business at 22, I didn't just walk away empty-handed. I had $200,000 in savings, money I'd earned, not inherited. My parents didn't know about it because I'd made it through internships and side projects they'd told me to abandon. For the first 5 years, I worked at the non-profit, genuinely. But at night, I did something else. I taught myself to invest. I read every book on finance. I took courses online. I studied market trends. I analyzed real estate deals. I became obsessed with understanding how wealth actually works, not from a position of entitlement, but from a position of learning. By year 6, I had my first major investment opportunity. A tech startup in Brooklyn needed $500,000. My network, not the family network, but MY Network, believed in the founder. I invested $100,000 of my own money. 2 years later, it was worth $3 million. I didn't tell anyone. Not my family. Not my colleagues. I just reinvested the profits. Then I noticed something. The deals my father was making were terrible. Predatory. Unsustainable. His company was built on a foundation that was cracking. But I also noticed something else. Some of his deals were actually good investments if you knew where to look. The companies he was funding had potential. So I did something bold. I created a shell investment company. Nothing traceable back to me. And I started buying minority stakes in the same companies my father's firm was funding. When those companies succeeded, and most of them did, I made money. Lots of it. 3 companies in particular were huge wins. One developed sustainable energy solutions. Another was a healthcare tech platform. The third was a financial services app. All 3 were funded by my father's firm. And all 3 had me as a silent, invisible investor. By year 10, I was worth approximately $150 million. My family had no idea. I lived modestly. I drove a used Lexus. I wore the same clothes. I ate lunch at Chipotle. On the surface, I was still the broke son who'd failed at life. But underneath, I was building an empire they could never touch. When my father cut me off officially, I was almost relieved. It meant the pretense was over. It meant I could finally stop performing poverty and start enjoying the freedom my real wealth had given me. But I didn't reveal myself. Not yet. I wanted to see how long they'd maintain this fantasy. How long they'd believe their own narrative about me. I wanted to see what they'd do when they found out the truth. 3 months after the cutoff, I received a call from my father's CFO. Not my father himself. His CFO. "Mr. Blackwell," she said carefully, "we've noticed some unusual activity in 3 of our major investments. We've been trying to trace the secondary investor, but it's well hidden. We were hoping you might have some insight." My heart stopped. They were looking at my stake in the Sustainable Energy Company. They were starting to see the threads. "I'm not sure what you mean," I said calmly. "There's someone who holds significant minority stakes in 3 of our portfolio companies. Someone very smart. Someone who's been making moves that are, well, they're better than our moves. We'd like to know who it is." I smiled. "Why don't you ask my father?" There was a pause. A long one. "We can't," she said quietly. "He's in the hospital. Heart attack. The doctors aren't sure he'll make it." What would you do if your family cut you off right before you needed to save their life? I told myself I wouldn't go. I told myself he deserved this. He'd cut me off. He'd disowned me. He'd made his choice. Let him deal with the consequences. But I went anyway. The hospital was the kind that rich people go to. Private rooms, personal staff, the best doctor's money could buy. My mother was sitting in a chair outside his room, looking smaller than I remembered. When she saw me, her face went through several emotions in quick succession. Shock, shame, then something that looked like relief mixed with guilt. "Marcus," she said, standing up. I don't know what to say." "How is he?" I asked. "The doctors think he'll survive, but there's damage to his heart. He'll need to make significant lifestyle changes. They're recommending early retirement." Early retirement. My father, who defined himself entirely by his work, would be forced to step away from the thing that gave him meaning. I understood the irony on a spiritual level. "Can I see him?" I asked. She hesitated. "He might not want." I didn't ask if he wanted to. I asked if I can see him. We went into the room. My father looked terrible, pale, thin, connected to machines that beeped in rhythms I didn't understand. But his eyes were open. And when he saw me, they widened in surprise. "Marcus," he croaked. "Hi, Dad. Why are you here?" It was such a perfectly him question. Not, "I'm glad you're here." Not, "I've missed you." But why? Always the logical question, never the emotional one. "Your CFO called me," I said. "She was asking about some investment patterns. I thought I should come discuss it in person." His eyes sharpened. Even half dead, his business instincts activated. "What investment patterns?" I pulled a chair close to his bed and sat down. I made sure my mother was out of earshot before I spoke. "Dad, I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to listen without interrupting. Can you do that?" He nodded slowly. 10 years ago, when I started working at the nonprofit, I didn't just go there to work. I went there to learn, to understand how wealth actually works. Not the inherited kind, the earned kind, the built kind. His face was unreadable. I taught myself to invest. I was very good at it. I made money, a lot of money. And I watched you. I watched every deal you made. And I noticed something Some of them were brilliant. Some of them were terrible. But all of them taught me something. Marcus, he started. Let me finish. I invested in 3 companies. 3 companies that your firm also invested in. Over the past 10 years, those investments have grown significantly. I now hold minority stakes in companies that generate billions in value. I'm worth approximately $150 million. Your firm doesn't know this because I've hidden it very carefully. The machines attached to my father started beeping faster. A nurse came in to check on him. He's fine, I said to the nurse. He's just processing some information. When she left, I continued. You cut me off because you thought I was a failure. You thought I was wasting my life. You were ashamed of me. But the entire time, I was building something you couldn't see. Something you couldn't control. Something you couldn't take away. My father's eyes were glistening now. Whether it was tears or just the effects of the medication, I couldn't tell. Why are you telling me this? He whispered. Because you're not going to recover if you're stressed about money. And I suspect that right now, you're very stressed about money. He didn't deny it. Your company is in trouble, I said. It wasn't a question. We made some bad investments, he admitted. The market changed. We didn't adapt fast enough. We're probably going to have to sell off major assets. We might lose everything. There it was. The empire was crumbling. And he'd cut me off right before the fall. I know, I said. Because I've been watching. And I have a proposal. He looked at me like I was a stranger. Which, I suppose, I was. What proposal? He asked. That's when I told him the real plan. I was going to save his company. But not out of love. And not out of forgiveness. Out of strategy. Would you help someone who rejected you if it served your bigger purpose? My father asked me to stay the night. Not as a son, but as a business partner. We sat in his hospital room, and I laid out everything. The investments. The money. The plan. I'm worth $150 million, I said. Your company needs $200 million to stabilize and grow. I can inject capital, but it comes with conditions. What conditions? He asked. First, I become CEO. You step down. You focus on recovery. He tried to protest, but I held up my hand. Second, I restructure the entire investment strategy. Out with the predatory deals. In with sustainable, long-term value creation. Your company becomes known for ethical investing. That becomes our competitive advantage. That's not, he started. Third, and most importantly, you stop lying to yourself about who I am. I'm not the son you wanted. I'm the son you got. And I'm better at this than you ever were. The silence that followed was deafening. If you refuse, I continued, I liquidate my stakes in those companies I'm invested in. That crashes the value of your entire portfolio by approximately 40%. Your company doesn't survive. You lose everything. It was a threat delivered as fact. That's blackmail, he said. That's business, I replied. He stared at the ceiling for a long moment. When he looked back at me, there were tears streaming down his face. I don't know you, he said. No, I agreed. You don't. But you're about to. The next morning, I met with my father's board of directors. I came with documents, financial projections, investment strategies, and a proposal that would reshape the company entirely. They thought I was a consultant he'd hired. They didn't know I was his son. That was strategic. I presented my plan: 3 new markets to enter, 5 existing investments to divest from, a complete restructuring of the management team, and a new focus on impact investing. Who's backing this investor? One of the board members asked. Someone who believes in what we can build, I said. By the end of the day, they'd agreed to let me lead the transformation. 3 months later, the company was stabilizing. 6 months later, it was thriving. My father watched from home, recovering, as his son, who he'd thought was a failure, rebuilt his empire. But then David called me. "Marcus, I need to talk to you. About what you're doing with the company. About the fact that you're our silent investor. About what the rest of the family is saying." I'd kept my identity hidden from David and my mother. Only my father knew. "What are they saying?" I asked. "That you're stealing the company. That you're taking advantage of Dad while he's weak. That this is revenge." I smiled. "Is that what you think?" "I don't know what to think," he admitted. "I didn't even know you had this kind of money. I didn't know you were smart enough to play this game at this level." "There's a lot you don't know about me," I said. "Maybe it's time you found out. When people underestimate you your whole life, do you have a responsibility to prove them wrong?" I called a family meeting. Not at the hospital. Not at the penthouse. At my office. When my mother walked in and saw that I'd decorated my office with artwork and had a staff of 15 working quietly at desks, her face went white. "This is yours?" she asked. "This is mine," I confirmed. David arrived next, and his reaction was even more visceral. He looked around like he was in a museum, trying to understand what he was seeing. My father came last, still moving slowly from his recovery, but walking with purpose. I'd prepared a presentation. On a large screen, I showed them everything. The timeline of my independence. The investments I'd made. The companies I'd built. The money I'd earned. The deals I'd done. The entire trajectory from broke non-profit worker to $150 million investor. "You cut me off because you thought I was failing," I began. "What you didn't realize is that I was learning. While you were running your empire on momentum and inheritance, I was building mine on strategy and intelligence." My mother looked like she might cry. "The 3 companies you were invested in, I was also invested. When they succeeded, I made money. When they almost failed, I made decisions to save them. That's how I ended up with enough capital to actually help your company survive." David leaned forward. "So this is revenge? This is you proving us wrong?" "No," I said. "This is me being honest about who I am. For 30 years, you've had a false image of me. It's time for the real one." "We didn't know," my mother said quietly. "We thought you were struggling." "I know," I said. "And I let you think that. Because I needed to build this without your interference. Without your need to control or direct or mold me into your version of success." My father spoke for the first time. "Why are you helping us?" he asked. "Why not just let us fail?" It was the most honest question he'd ever asked me. "Because I've learned something that you're only now understanding," I said. "Money without meaning is empty. Revenge without growth is hollow. And family, even when broken, is still the most important thing." I paused. "I'm not helping you because I forgive you for cutting me off. I'm helping you because I'm choosing to build something better than resentment. I'm choosing to create a legacy that isn't based on what I could have done to destroy you, but on what I can do to elevate you." David looked at me with something like respect. "Who are you?" "I'm Marcus Blackwell," I said. "And I'm done pretending to be someone I'm not." That's when my father made an announcement that changed everything. "The board has agreed to make Marcus the CEO," he said. "I'm stepping down completely. This company is his now." My mother gasped. David looked shocked. And I realized something profound. This wasn't about proving them wrong anymore. This was about proving myself right. When you finally become who you always were, do you need anyone else's approval anymore? The first month as CEO, I made changes that shocked the entire industry. I divested from predatory investments. I redirected capital toward social impact. I hired a leadership team based on merit, not connections. I opened the company's doors to transparency. The traditional wealthy didn't like it. "You're destroying the firm," critics said. But the market responded differently. A new generation of investors, people like me who'd built wealth through intelligence rather than inheritance, started pouring capital into the company. The firm's value doubled within 6 months. My father watched from his recovery chair at home, seeing his empire transform into something better than it had ever been. My mother came to my office one afternoon. "I owe you an apology," she said. "You do," I agreed. "I was so focused on what I thought you should be that I never asked who you actually were." "I know. Can you forgive me?" I thought about this carefully. I'm learning to separate forgiveness from forgetting. I forgive what you did, but I won't forget why you did it. And I won't ever need your approval again. She nodded, accepting this. David became my COO. It took time, but he's good at it. And more importantly, he finally sees me. The most shocking part of this journey wasn't the money or the success or the public vindication. It was discovering something about myself. I don't actually need them to believe in me. I never did. I built an entire empire in the shadows while they were still trapped in their delusion of what I was. The ultimate plot twist. They were never my limitation. I was never limited by their rejection. I was liberated by it. One day, 6 months into my tenure as CEO, an investor approached me with an acquisition offer. They wanted to buy the company for $2 billion. I could take it. I'd make $500 million on the deal alone. I could retire and never work again. But then I realized, I'm not running this company for the money anymore. I'm running it because it's meaningful. Because it's mine. Because I built it. My father called me that evening. "I heard about the offer," he said. "You did," I confirmed. "Are you going to take it?" "No," I said. There was a long pause. "Why not?" he asked. "Because I finally understand what you never could," I said. "The company isn't an asset to be traded. It's a legacy to be built. It's a statement about what we stand for. And I'm not done building it yet." He cried. Actually cried. After all these years, my father finally understood what I'd always known, that the worth of something isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in purpose. When you finally have the power to destroy everything that hurt you, do you? Or do you build something better instead? 1 year after becoming CEO, I was standing in our office, a space designed by architects and thought leaders, a space that represented everything I believe in. The company had grown by 300%. We'd entered 3 new markets. We'd created 500 new jobs. We'd directed $1 billion into social impact investments. We were being written about in business magazines as the most innovative firm in the industry. But more importantly, we were changing how people thought about wealth. My father came to the office for the first time since his recovery. He walked through it slowly, looking at every detail. The sustainable design, the diverse leadership team, the transparency reports on every wall, the impact metrics displayed like art. When he finished the tour, he sat in the visitor's chair in my office. "It's beautiful," he said. "Thank you," I replied. "I'm proud of you," he said. "I have been for a long time. I was just too blind to see it." This was the moment I'd secretly dreamed about for years. My father, finally seeing me. Finally acknowledging that I'd been right all along. But here's the thing I learned. Once you actually achieve that moment, it's not as satisfying as you imagined it would be. "I know you're proud," I said. "And I appreciate it. But I'm doing this for me now. Not to prove anything to you. That chapter is closed." He smiled. Actually smiled, with peace in his eyes. "I know," he said. "That's why I'm really proud. My family didn't cut me off to hurt me. They cut me off because they couldn't see me. And I didn't need them to see me to know who I was. The ultimate irony? By cutting me off, they freed me to become myself. I'm not sure if I would have built the same empire if they'd supported me. I probably would have been shaped by their expectations, their limitations, their vision. But instead, I was shaped by my own choices. And that made all the difference. My mother asked me one day, 'Do you ever regret pretending to be poor for all those years?' I thought about this carefully. 'No,' I said, 'because it wasn't pretending. It was me figuring out who I was apart from what you expected me to be. And that was the most important education I ever received.'" She understood. If this story moved you, if you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or cut off by people you loved, I want to hear from you. Leave a comment and tell me your story. And if you're watching this thinking you know who you are based on what others think of you, I'm telling you now, you don't. The real you is still being built. In the quiet moments. In the invisible work. In the time when nobody's watching. That's where the magic happens. If you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. Because next week, I'm going deeper into how I actually built the investment strategy that made me $150 million. And trust me, it's going to blow your mind. Thank you for watching. Thank you for believing in the power of revelation and transformation. I'll see you in the next story.